committee to order. Proof of notification, is it properly posted? Okay. Yes, okay. Agenda, looks like we have a 17-point agenda. It was amended late last week. So everyone's looking at the amended version of the agenda. Would someone like to make a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Agentis, second by McGuire. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have an agenda. Agentis, McGuire. All right, and then we have the August 1st, 2022 meeting minutes to approve. Everyone have a chance to look at those? To make a motion to approve those?
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Agentis, second by Carol. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, they are approved. That brings us to zoning petitions. Just give me 1 second here to get my. All right, so I think what we'll do is what we've done in the past for those of you here. Zoning Administrator Bindle will do a brief description and discussion of what the petition entails. And if we have any questions, we will have you come forward as we do each one. And at that mic there, I'm assuming. Just so I want to turn that mic on for the. So the first one will be Schneider Bailey. Is that how you say that? Bailey? Beatley. That will be the first one. So if you want to go ahead and sit in the hot seat for a sec. And you got to talk into the mic, Mike.
Representing the applicant is Caleb Crossman. The background on this petition is that they want to separate out the farm buildings in 7+ acres. The remaining acres that is in the town of Univista will also be rezoned since it's in the township. The rest of the land goes into the town of Ithaca, so it makes sense as to take care of it now, of the rezone part that's left over. Everyone's got the map. We're trying to see the farm buildings. I'm just trying to separate out that from the rest of it.
Does anyone from the committee have any questions? So it's once it's split off, there's a 40-acre parcel in Ithaca and a 33-acre parcel in Buena Vista. Is that
Correct?
Actually, there's 2 40s and.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And it's less than 35, and that's why we are.
And the town Univista part of it.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Carroll?
Yeah, for the 26 acres that are left, that's intended to be sold with some other property, so it'll still be larger than 35.
Exactly. That 26 will be contiguous with the 80 in the town of Ithaca. 6 or 100.
Right. That transaction is, where's that stand?
So they're both going to be sold at auction. So
Okay.
the house will be sold and the land will be sold.
All right.
Potentially the same person, but absolutely separate.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Would someone like to make the motion to, or make a motion? I won't tell you which way to make a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Carol. Do I have a second? Second by Turk. Any other discussion on this rezoning? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, is there, am I supposed to ask me? Public comment? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm new to this. I apologize. So I guess we should rescind that vote and have public comment.
I move to rescind the vote.
Is that how we do it?
I think because it was an official vote.
Okay, so I have a motion to rescind while we have public comment. Do I have a second? Okay, any discussion on that motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so if you want to give us a moment, we'll let this gentleman come forward to public comment. I just need to speak into the mic so that they are not. Or talk loud. whichever you want. Talk really loud. Won't be recorded. I think he did just explain that what,
Be agricultural residential. The lot's gonna be less than 35 acres, which is the minimum per ag forestry, so it's gonna be less than that. So it has to go to a different classification zoning. The farm buildings are gonna be split off from the rest of the ag land. The ideal is that you're separating out the farm buildings, so it's going to be a separate lot. It will have the farm buildings on it already. Whatever left over could still be buildable for residents. It's not going to be a subdivision that's been planned or anything like that. It's just trying to bring in the lot sizes into the zoning classification categories correctly.
so Mike, just to clarify for our sake, if someone wanted to put in a subdivision, would they not have to come before us for a different kind of an R1 or an R2?
It would be an R1, R2 zoning
So if
classification.
that were to have, they wouldn't be able to do that, other than to put in a single, what's allowed on an ag residential? How many houses?
One residence.
Okay, does that answer your question?
I'm sorry, may I ask for the name so I can put it in the record here?
So in order for them to put more than one house on there, they have to come back to us and try to rezone it into an R1 or an R2. Okay. All right, any other questions or public comment? Did you have any other questions? You're good? Okay. All right, so with that, I would entertain a motion one way or the other. All right, motion by Carol, second by Turk. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying, oh. Director. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That is approved. Thank you. All right, the second one would be the Schmitz LLC rezoning petition. Someone present for that?
Matt Schmitz is
You
here.
can go ahead and come forward.
Similar situation here, that Schmitz LCC has a lot of land. They want to split out 3 acres, which has the house, a couple of accessory structures, and they want to separate from the rest of the property that they have.
Okay.
Same thing that we've been doing.
So how many, remind me how many, so it's, how many acres is the final? It's 3 acres?
3 acres, yep.
Does anyone have any questions? The only question I have is, and I think we've talked about this, is just, I mean, more of just a, when we rezone something to this small of a acreage, the one concern I kind of have in the back of my mind is what would you do if you ever had to redo your septic, and making sure that there's adequate space within that 3 acres to create another septic.
If you look at the colored aerial photo
Yep.
that was sent out, there's plenty of space as north of the house and plenty of space below south of the house.
As long as they don't build buildings on those
Right,
spots.
but there's
Okay.
no problem.
Okay, that's, I mean, that's always just in the back of my mind when we're doing these small acreages, to make sure that you wouldn't want to not have a septic fail and not be able to replace it. Does anyone else have questions? Then I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the acreage.
All right. Have a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Turk. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. It's adopted. Thank you for coming in. All right, that brings us to the Woolley rezoning petition.
The applicant, Chris Woolley, is here. To give the background on this is south side of Gotham, down by the river. And if you look at the aerial photos, there's a whole bunch of purple little squares. That's from the old hamlet, basically, of Gotham, where it was all blocked off. Town, when they rezoned it, they rezoned that to residential lots. Mr. Woolley has approximately 11, 13 acres down there. They've always had pigs. If you look at the pictures, you can actually see some of the sheds are actually in the town right-of-way roads and all that stuff. That has been annexed, or not annexed, but back to them. So what they want to do is have animals again, but it's not zoned properly, and it's bring it into compliance to have animals and more than one accessory structure.
So is the town has approved it?
Yes.
They didn't have any concerns with having critters?
No.
All right. Mr. Carroll,
Make sure I understand the background. The zoning should have been changed earlier, but they just didn't do it at that time. So now we're getting it squared away on the paperwork. Yeah.
they must have intended it to be more residential and it just never got built up as residences out there to make it R1. I'm assuming they had thought that maybe is it Gotham? So it
Right.
would grow and it didn't grow.
I mean, you're right down by the river where there's not that much,
And floodplain probably?
not too much.
Not too much, yeah.
Quite a bit out, but there's some in. Keep the ducks.
Mike, what is it being rezoned?
2 egg residential.
Acres. All right, any other questions? All right, would someone like to make a motion? All right, do I have a second? Mr. Carroll, any further discussion? And is there any public comment? I should have asked that. All right. Any other discussion? We're good? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. There you go. Thank you for coming in. All right, that brings us to Mathis rezoning petition.
Jim is here as applicant. A little bit background on this one. Last year, they rezoned 2.67 acres to residential 2. They are adding more land to that existing lot that was created. So the total is going to be 7.37 acres, and it's going from ag forestry and residential 2 to ag residential.
How come it was originally ag forestry in R2 and not just ag residential?
It was less than 5 acres.
Oh, okay.
So now that's going over 5 acres and go to a residential and to have the allowance for animal units, horses.
Okay. Mr. Carroll?
The form has 8.25 acres.
Yeah, I saw that too. Zoning.
Right, so when they come and make applications, we don't have the exact acreage all the time. So I always rough it up. If it was less, say like it was 6 acres, we would have to re-advertise, but it can always be lower.
So the number you quoted is the final number after surveying then?
Right, after the survey, and as you see the sheet that we sent out, you add it up and it comes up to 7 acres and 7.37.
Oh, I see. So you put this original form. When you make the original form, you err on the side of caution and make it higher so that to meet the requirements we have to do for advertising.
Correct.
Gotcha. But if it's less, we're okay.
Correct.
Gotcha. Didn't know that. All right. Any other questions?
Forest Township,
So Viola area or, well, I mean, Forest Township is up by Viola.
no, it's on the hillside, ridge top.
All right. Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Carroll, motion, is that a motion to approve?
Yes. Motion to approve.
All right, thank you. Do I have a second?
A second.
Turk seconds. Any other discussion? Any public comment? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? All right, you have your approval. Thank you. All right, that brings us to, last but not least, Ash Creek United Methodist, Richland County Highway rezoning.
So Josh from the Highway Department's here to represent as a part of the applicant. Background on this, correct me if I'm wrong on this at all, Josh, is that County Highway O is going to be real or straightened out on a curve. The location, when it gets straightened out, it's going to be on top of the Ash Creek's septic system. So there's going to be some land that's going to be purchased to put a new septic system on the parcel that is going to be purchased. And
Who's purchasing it?
The county highway department.
Okay,
So to give more clarification on this project's about 20 years old, and Richland County has about $500,000 stuck into this project, and we have about $1 million awarded to us for it. What we found out about a year ago, all of a sudden became the problem that the existing septic system is right off the right of way. When we realign that road, it's going to be right on top of that existing septic. So you actually have utilities running underneath County O right now, and that needs to be moved. If we fail to remove that septic or relocate it, we're hit with two different options. One, we basically forfeit the $500,000 the county has invested into it, and we forfeit for the bill funding that we may be awarded for the remainder of County Highway O, and it sets us back to ground zero, basically a whole loss. Or the second option would be to have to relocate the entire church. So this is the easiest way to appease this.
relocate the entire church?
Yeah,
It seems pricey.
yeah,
Has Public Safety looked at this?
Public Works,
Or Public Works, right? Yeah,
Right.
sorry. They have looked at this as
they
well.
have looked at it. Yeah.
Okay, and as far as from their perspective, this makes sense.
Makes sense, yes.
Okay.
So, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just, because you're really gonna be cutting more into the hillside right there. And
Actually, right there,
That's why that is.
we're actually, because the road has to be widened out, because right now you have 11-foot lanes and we have to widen them out to 12-foot lanes. Right now you have a 2-foot shoulder on each side, and with the new road designed by federal standards, it's gonna actually have a 6-foot wide shoulder, 3-foot paved, 3-foot gravel. So that's why the bank next to the church has to be cut and re-sloped to accommodate
Oh,
that. But
okay.
primarily the road right there is shifting farther to the east to realign that curve to straighten out that road.
Okay, the curve that's after, to the north.
Correct, yeah.
Hmm, interesting.
Mr. Carroll?
Yeah. Sounds like it's the best path forward, but could we just put that on the screen and so you could point at things just so I can visualize?
Yeah, who's ever steering the boat here.
And the church is,
Fred Gruber, which is Gruber Consulting, who deals with our land negotiations. Him and I personally went and had a meeting with the church, the entire congregation. I think it was about 2 weeks ago now, and they're full on support with it.
okay.
One, because they don't have to pay the bill, so they're happy.
I mean, really, yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you get a new septic out of,
Yeah, they're
Out of
getting a
it.
new septic out of the deal. They're getting an extra chunk of land, and then it'll end up being deeded back to them in the long run.
okay. So if you go down to, there's a map like the second. There you go. So who owns the half acre now? That it's a, the count?
Stibbe Farms owns it right
Okay,
now,
so
and they
we're-
have been communicated with, and they're full supportive of doing this.
Okay, so
Yeah.
everyone, all the parties have been,
Yeah, that field that's gonna be potentially purchased, that couple acres worth, it's actually old pasture right now, so it's just overgrown thorns, briars, brush, so they're not doing anything with it currently anyways.
And how much acreage is the addition? It says 0 on the form.
What did we have it listed at? I think,
it says half acre.
well, what do we have it purchased for zone? It's a couple acres altogether, isn't it?
right, if you go down to
Oh,
the
I see it now, 2.5.
Yeah.
next one, it says final CSM down there at 5E. So you
Yeah. Would it be easier if we maybe pulled it up on GIS so everybody could see it that way? Septic.
Oh, it's totally across. the
Yeah.
road.
Oh, sure, just put that under
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
It's no problem.
that's weird. So, in place for the septic, you figured out? Sorry. I should ask.
Right up in that corner, right?
Yeah, right there.
Where it says soil test form.
Oh, yeah, okay, okay.
All right. Public comment? Can you talk to the mic? Sorry that.
Curious of what the purchase price will be.
Oh, that we don't.
That would probably be his question, how much we're purchasing that for. Fred hasn't told me what he's negotiated for a price yet.
We don't know.
No.
Okay, the answer to that question is we
Who's-
don't know.
Who is negotiating?
Fred Gruber Consulting.
That's someone that you have
That's what we hired.
engaged a contract with.
Correct.
To-
He's formerly from Jewel Associates, which county's familiar with Jewel.
Mhm.
Fred used to work for Jewel, and now he has his own consulting, and he has all the history with this particular project, so we kept him on to continue to negotiate.
So he's negotiating with all the parties
Correct.
for you.
Correct.
Okay, so we don't know the purchase price. I'm assuming that that all comes before the Public Works Committee?
It comes before the Public Works and full county board because it's purchase other than right away.
So the purchase price will become public before this all becomes official. So we'll have to go through the county board.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
All right, motion by Carol,
I'll second it.
second by Gentis. Any further questions or discussion?
Discussion.
Yes.
I wonder how many more like this we have out there.
There's a few things we found out there that aren't going to be pretty in the long run, but we'll cross those bridges when we get there.
So is any work, there's work that's already begun on O that we
Well,
did
the only
with
thing that's
previously?
happened so far is basically surveying at this point on old, no physical construction has actually taken place. And we're hoping that maybe in 2023, but being so the timeline, we're probably looking at 2024 before actually boots hit the ground out there for that
And we
project.
received federal dollars to do this?
We did on that stretch, which runs, it's federal dollars.
Okay.
That runs from the O and double O intersection, Santa Claus Lane, up to
Mhm.
Cardinal Crest. That's stage one. There's two other stages that'll take you all the way back to the backside of Richland Center, Walmart, the bicycle trail. That's
So is this
basically
focusing on straightening this road mostly or resurfacing
resurfacing the whole thing, all the way to the
Resurfacing.
base, widening.
and some straightening?
Yep.
Is this the only section of straightening or are there others?
There's others all the way up
Because
through
it's
there.
pretty.
But
there's
we've
some-
had to split it up into three different projects, and that we have two of those projects, two different phases out for bill funding right now, and we'll get final word on that hopefully by the end of this month, September.
Okay.
But we'll see what happens with that because it's bill funding, so it's kind of a touchy situation.
All right, that's probably beyond our purview anyway. I was just curious. All right, any other questions? Otherwise, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. All right, that brings us to item number 6, referendum ad hoc committee document. So I don't know if I remember to send this. I didn't send this into the folder. It is in the folder? Okay.
Yep.
No, do you know how to turn your mic on?
It's on,
Okay.
yeah.
There's a weird button on the bottom.
I noticed that. I saw the demonstrations. Good now. So, I am a member of the Referendum Ad Hoc Committee, and I've been asked by that committee to talk to Land and Zoning, since I also serve on this committee. This is the first committee we're communicating with about what our situation is and what the Referendum Ad Hoc Committee is looking for as far as information from Land and Zoning. The broad task has to do with the resolution that was passed that talks about proposed funding reductions and coming up with, okay, what would that look like? There are several steps that the Referendum Ad Hoc Committee went through to get us to ready for that discussion. The first page of this document, it's in your folders if you want to pull it up and follow along, but we're showing it here on the screen as well. The first chart is a chart of
the total staff of Richland County. There are 279 official employees of Richland County, and this chart just breaks down where all those employees are. 279. The areas of concern that they were looking at were, okay, where are the people? You know, people is the largest expense that the county has, and so they wanted to break down, okay, where are all the people? And you can see the biggest piece of the pie there is Pine Valley Community Village with 85, Health and Human Services has 75, Sheriff at 33, Highway at 30, and then you get up into the very small areas up in the upper left, which is where you'd find zoning and sanitation with 3. And so the other smaller departments are all in there, but that's just for those who are wondering, okay, where are all the people? That's where they are. If we go to the second page, we've got another chart, and this is looking at each department's impact on the budget as it has to do with tax levy. Tax levy is the piece of our financing that we are crunched on. And so they wanted to take a look and say, okay, which departments are most utilizing tax levy? And if you look at this very small printed chart, the orange bars are the adopted budget expenses for a department, and the green bars are budgeted revenues. Not all those revenues come from property taxes. This one is just showing expenses versus revenues. You can generally make a leap. So if a revenue is less than the department's expenses, the rest of it's being filled by tax levy. So in areas where you have a green bar that is lower than the orange bar, you can see the tallest orange bar is Pine Valley Community Village. This bar graph in particular does include Pine Valley's debt service. So that's why it looks their budgeted expenses exceed their revenues. Health and Human Services has significant revenues, but also significant expenses. And so there's a utilization of property tax levy there. The farthest left column is the sheriff. Sheriff's department doesn't really have ways to produce revenue. So their green column is very tiny, and most of their funding is property tax levy. They do have some sources of funding, and those are accounted for, but as you can see, it's very heavily weighted on the expense side. And then if you follow across all the other headings, there are a couple of columns that are revenue only, like state shared revenue and sales tax on the far right. Those do not have expenses associated with them. We do collect a very small amount of interest on taxes. And then the other smaller departments show, you know, various revenues and expenses that in some cases barely register on this graph. And these represent the overall size. You can see the tallest bars, Pine Valley's expenses go just above 10 million. Health and Human Services just below 10 million on this, and this is again based on the 2022 adopted budget. If we take a look at our third chart. Yes. Orange is expense, green is revenue.
Mike, I thought that you had said that last 2 years your revenue was more than your expenses, and this chart doesn't show that.
If you look at the chart, it says budgeted, it's not actual.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, this is
That's the
the
problem with these
adopted.
numbers here that you gave is wrong. Bring in about 40 to 80,000 more. So when you look at your miscellaneous, that's green, probably a lot of that's coming from our office, that's not counted.
Yeah. It wasn't part of the adopted budget, but it is reality that's happening.
Okay.
So if we go to the next chart, we're really focusing on the overall budget of Richland County. Our expenses is the top bar in the area of 36.267 million. Down at the bottom, our revenues, they're segmented into property taxes and everything else. The blue section represents our property tax levy of just under 10.5 million. Again, based on the 2022 adopted budget. So you can see the county's bringing in almost 26 million from other sources. And that's a whole lot of different sources. If we continue on, we now track over time what's been going on with our property tax levy. This chart is separated into blue and orange. The blue bar at the bottom section is our operational tax levy, which is again where we're having our crunch. The upper part in the orange is our debt levy. And you can see over the past 6 years, 5 years or so, we've seen a significant jump in our debt levy. That's because we've been utilizing the short-term borrowing to relieve some of the pressure on our operating expenses. And what we're coming to is the point where that's no longer enough. The blue lines have been fairly static. They actually went down from 2014 to 2015, if you look at that, and then have been slowly increasing since then. We are only allowed to raise that operational tax levy based on the amount of net new construction each year in the county. That's a number the state gives to us. We can't, without permission from the voters, just go in and raise property tax revenue for operations. We're allowed to borrow money without going to the voters, and that's what we've been doing for the last several years. You'll see that debt line, if you project it out farther, it will increase because of the tower project and other things that we're going to be taking on debt for. But for right now, we've been doing that with some short-term borrowings. We've kind of formalized that $1,050,000 a year over the last couple of years. Prior to that, we did like a 2.1 million, I think it was. And so you're seeing the impacts of those borrowings on that orange part of the top. So for our taxpayers, they're feeling their property taxes go up. What we're seeing is the money we need to pay for day-to-day operations to keep the county running, we are pinched. We are not allowed to go any higher, even though everything we do every day costs more. If we look at each department's reliance on the property tax, who is using the most tax levy? If you look at the chart on the next page, we've got a whole bunch of orange bars, and that represents how much property tax levy each department is using. The sheriff's department, as we pointed out, they don't have revenues. So most of their operating budget comes from the property tax levy. That's why their bar is the highest. Health and Human Services is next. The third column there is specifically debt service except for Pine Valley, because Pine Valley's debt, for the purposes of this chart, was contained within that orange bar a couple spaces over where it says Pine Valley Community Village. Pine Valley is unique in that, yes, we are paying their debt service from property tax levy, but they are returning operational funds to our general budget every year. Have to represent that on one chart. But you can see all the way on out till you get to the green lines. Those are each department's piece of the property tax pie, if you will. People have raised questions about certain departments. The next chart takes a look at Health and Human Services and their 2022 budgeted revenues. You can see only about 25% or so of their revenue is represented by property tax levy. There are some operations within Health and Human Services that generate revenue. There are some that are cost neutral. The entire cost is paid for by other program funding. And so that's why 75% or so of their budget comes from other revenues. HHS, the point here, brings in lots of revenue from the federal government and the state government. And as we consider how we handle budget situations, there are cuts we could make that might impair that ability to generate that revenue, and that would not make our problem any better. It might make it worse. People also think of HHS in terms of programs that they recognize. Commonly, some folks will say it's a welfare agency or whatever other program they're familiar with. There are many things that HHS does. As you can see, if you look at number of employees, their most category of employees is mental health. They have 9 administrative staff, 4 in finance. Those are the folks that are bringing in that revenue and keeping track of it all. Aging and Disability has 8 staff. Child Protection has 9. Economic Support has 15. That was explained by the HHS director at one of our finance meetings. That's because the Capital Consortium pays us to have those employees. It made economic sense for the Capital Consortium to have employees in Richland County because it was cheaper to have them here than in Madison or Sauk County or some places like that. And then Public Health has 5 employees. The Referendum Ad Hoc Committee is going to be working with HHS and Veterans Standing Committee to better understand, okay, so where do we look at so we're not doing damage to that revenue picture and keep the revenues up. People have said a lot of things about Pine Valley. A couple of common quotes we've heard: Pine Valley makes a profit for the county. Pine Valley doesn't pay its debts. And there may be some truth in both of those statements. Pine Valley's operating expenses for the 2022 budget were at about 9.2 million. Their revenues projected at about 9.7 million. So operationally, they're bringing in about $500,000 that then is available to the county for our operating expenses in other departments. Their debt levy for 2022 is 1.481 million. That's the principal and interest on the building that we built. We are taking that on property tax levy because the state rules allow us to shift that to the property tax rather than try to pay it out of our operational budget. So yes, Pine Valley does produce operational revenue for the county, but the property taxpayers are paying the debt on the building. If you added those two numbers up, the 1.41 and the 500 or so, there's about a net $900,000 impact on the property tax or so. But again, that distinction between capital expense and operating expense is very important because again, our operating expenses are where we're feeling the big pinch. And this next chart just shows, you know, the profits which could have been applied to debt service, just over $500,000, that would still have left $976,000 that needed to be covered. So Pine Valley is not producing enough operational profit to pay their own mortgage, so to speak. There's been a lot of talk about state shared revenue in the news, in Facebook forums, in county meetings. And this chart tracks the reality of what has happened with shared revenue going back as far as 2001. And there are various reasons this has happened. There have been, you know, political changes beyond our borders that had impact on this. You'll notice there was a drop from 2011 to 2012. That's when the state made its legislation Act 10, and they cut shared revenue on the theory that local governments now had more leverage against employee costs. The red line on this chart tracks the actual receipt of state shared revenue payments by Richland County. In 2001, the actual dollar amount was $1.363 million, pardon me, and some change. If you look at the 2022 estimated amount, it's down to 1.219 million. So we've lost actual dollars, not just the purchasing power, but the actual dollars are lower than they were 20 years ago. If you look at the green line on this chart, this is if the 2001 number had been preserved and simply adjusted each year for inflation. No increase in the real number, just adjusting it for inflation every year. We would be over $2 million in 2021 if it had been adjusted for inflation. What I tell people is this isn't the only reason we have problems, but it's a big reason. The state has not kept pace even with inflation, let alone whatever discussions people might have about unfunded mandates and other, you know, stuff like that. If just straight inflation, we've actually lost ground in real dollars, not just inflationary dollars. And this next chart kind of combines all of what we talked about up to this point, declining shared revenues versus property taxes. And you can see that as the shared revenue percentage of our budget has dropped since 2001, property taxes have had to increase. And these blue lines on here that represent property tax include debt service levy. That's why they're increasing. But they've had to jump to represent a higher percentage of what we're spending because shared revenue isn't covering it. When we think about where we go from here, you know, certain things have happened over at least the last decade as we've tried to deal with this. We put off capital improvements and repairs and things like that. And we're feeling some of the pinch of that stuff right now, like with the radio tower project. We kicked some cans down the road. We had many instances where county employees got no or minimal benefit increases, and then were shouldering greater burdens of insurance costs because those costs were going up. This chart here kind of lays out a history since 2012 of what happened as far as wage increases and stuff. We did invest in the wage study. We did make some adjustments, implementing that in 2018. But as far as cost of living increases or regular patterns of wage increases, as you see in many industries, we haven't seen that in Richland County. We have heard from employees that that's an issue. we know that it affects our ability to hire and retain people. And so that is something administration is seeking to remedy moving forward, but in our current operational revenue pinch, it becomes incredibly difficult to do. There's a note at the bottom under this chart. Earlier this year, Richland County adopted a strategic plan that determined this path is no longer sustainable. That's where we're getting to dealing with the budget forecasts over the next 5 years. As a county board member, I am pleased that we have that 5-year projection. That's not something we've had previously. And so we are able to look ahead and see, okay, if we make an increase in this today, we can forecast out how much more that's going to cost in 5 years. You know, if you give an annual wage increase, well, that compounds every year, 2% this year, 2% next year, and so on. And so our budget numbers and projections now are trying to take that into account, which is where we got to the resolutions that were passed by the county board and to the summary that happens in this chart. Committees are being asked to decrease their impact on the property tax levy. Some of these decreases may be permanent. Some could be identified as potentially being part of an operational levy referendum. In 2023, we're using ARPA funds to bridge the gap. So we're looking at cuts starting in 2024, but projecting out through 2027, because that's what our 5-year plan is looking out at. And if you look at this chart that's on the screen right now, they're projecting, and these were based on each department's share of the tax levy. It was determined that, you know, okay, those who are using the most levy should bear the most reductions percentage-wise. So that's why you're looking at, you know, the largest single piece of the pie being in Public Safety Committee. Health and Human Services has a significant chunk. Highway and Property has a good-sized chunk. Administration, Clerk, County Board, Treasurer has a chunk. Pine Valley has a chunk. And then very much smaller pieces up there, including land conservation and zoning for $50,000. What the Referendum Ad Hoc Committee wants to know from this committee is, okay, so what does that look like? If we have to be $50,000 less by 2027, what does that look like? How could that be accomplished? We're not saying it's a good idea. We're not saying it's a desirable idea, but how could it be accomplished? Why we need to know this is we have to deliver 2 things to the Finance Committee and then to the full board. We have to deliver, number 1, a recommendation on a referendum. So if we determine that, you know, these cuts are terrible and we need to fund them by increasing our operational revenue, we have to know how much we're asking the voters for to enhance that operational revenue. And number 2, we also need to have a plan for if we do a referendum and it fails, what happens? Because that's essential information for the electorate to have if they're going to vote on a referendum. Okay, if I vote no, then what happens? So we need to present both sides of the picture. And that's essential information for the Referendum Ad Hoc Committee to have so they can put this all together, come up with what a total amount would be if we're going to do a referendum, and then see how we go about doing that. If we move forward with a referendum, it would be on the April ballot next year. So time is of the essence. We're trying to start some initial education of voters of, okay, how did we get to where we are and what is our real situation? A lot of what I just laid out for you. So people can clearly understand, okay, this is where we are. This is, you know, people have said, oh, why are we in such a rush for this? Well, because we're up against it. We've put things off for about as long as we can. We have some ARPA funding that's going to get us through 2023, but after that, the numbers do not add up. And we have to make them add up by law. So we've got to figure out how to do that. The last page there has some of the next step that we're doing. They're going to be going on the radio in the morning show. We're looking at producing some videos to go on social media. I did a demo one for the committee and have been asked to create a couple more, just to get the information out there and talk to people, connect with community groups. All the committees, the standing committees, are going to have a rep from the Referendum Ad Hoc Committee doing what I've done for you today, laying out the picture and explaining where we are and what we need to do from here. And then working back and forth with the committee to get the information the Referendum Ad Hoc Committee needs. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
not so much a question, I think is more of a basic comment. I haven't had a chance to watch the ad hoc meetings online yet, but I do intend to do that. But is anyone thinking that we can make these cuts in more any way other than by cutting positions? I mean, I feel like we have shaved every budget. If there's a paperclip to cut, we've cut it.
That's the unfortunate reality of the situation we're in. We've cut the easy stuff long ago.
Right.
We've cut some difficult stuff already. Now we're down to, if we're going to hit the scope of these cuts that are being talked about, it's going to be reduction of services. And that means less people. Certain things we're mandated to do, we'll have to maintain those. And that's another part of the research that's been done is, okay, what are we legally obligated to do versus what things are not mandatory? So that's information we're taking into. But it's all about putting that information together and then taking it to the voters and saying, okay, what do you want us to do? Do you want to pony up more operational property tax levy to preserve these services? Or are you going to vote no on that and we have to make cuts?
I mean, one other question I had is, talking about revenues, and like Mike was saying, his revenues aren't reflected in his, but do we feel like we could accurately predict what our revenues will be enough that we could put it in a budget and say, we can cover that 50,000 from land and zoning by increasing our revenues by 50,000?
And that's a valid question, because it's not that has to necessarily be cut from the budget. It has to be cut from what you're spending from property tax levy.
Correct. So if
there
we
could
increase
still
our
be
revenues,
spending,
right,
and people have said, well, can't you get grants? Can't you? Well, we've tried some of that.
and we are getting grants.
Yeah.
They just,
They don't add up, and it's
Right.
not enough. There's nobody sitting out there waiting to pay all our bills, basically. Like with our radio tower project, there's nobody sitting out there waiting to gift us enough money to just pay for that. So we have to borrow it and do it ourselves. We're trying to find stuff to offset parts of it, but bottom line, the property taxpayers are going to have to do that project that we've been putting off for way too many years. And many areas of county government, I would say, are in that status. Not necessarily with capital projects, but we haven't grown, we haven't increased services, we've been cutting for a long period of time.
Mr. Carroll.
Yeah, I'm on the ad hoc committee also, and I'm supposed to give this same presentation to Public Works. I think I'm just going to clip a video of what he just said. That was excellent. But I was going to say the same thing. That its net effect on the tax levy is what we really are looking at. And it may be a new source of revenue, and we'll certainly try. But like you said,
Right. I'm just wondering what kind of, how, I'm assuming that we're going to need to show, if we were to say we're just going to increase revenues by $50,000, I'm assuming we're going to have to show that we're capable of increasing revenue, like show some kind of historical
Yep.
income levels or whatever.
Yeah,
So-
that would be discussion with the administrator on the planning and everything to reflect that in the budget. If
Okay.
it is realistic, by all means, I think that's the best way to go, is to show if there's revenue we're not properly capturing in the
I
budget.
mean, I don't know that, I'm not going to put him on the spot and
Yeah.
right now, because we
But
have
if
a
that
lot
were
to
the
talk
case,
about.
That would be the.
But that's
the
just
best way to
that
go.
was one of my thoughts is, in this particular case, I mean, when I look at public safety, because I'm chair of public safety, what I'm tasked with in that,
Yeah.
the $1.6 million, there's no way that we can do anything other than cut deputies and, well, we can't cut jailers because that's mandated.
Yep.
So it'll be,
It is not a
Challenging.
pleasant proposition.
we have a lot to talk about. Yeah.
Can I ask
Okay.
a Question?
Yep. Jen-
So when do you need, we need to discuss this 50,000. When do you, as a committee, want that?
October 31st.
Yeah.
Is our
It's
It's still,
resolution.
so we have another month, so next month we have to
Yeah,
really
so,
go back with it.
I think it's appropriate. So I've had some brief discussions with Kathy and Mike that we were going to kind of sit down and brainstorm some things, and they were going to brainstorm things to bring to the committee, suggestions to bring to the committee, so that we can thoroughly discuss it at October's meeting.
Okay. And then, I don't know if this is part of the agenda, but you mentioned it. I've never heard the answer to this because I've never asked it. You said that we're legally obligated to balance this. What happens if we don't? Do we go bankrupt?
The State Department of Revenue produces a report every year of counties that collect more in property tax levy than they are allowed to. That's one thing that happens. So if we just went out and took more property tax levy, then they reduce our state aid to
Mhm.
offset that and perhaps penalize us in other ways too, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
If we have had unbalanced budgets in the past. We've eaten into our operational reserves to do that. We've just recently succeeded in building up our reserves to where our fiscal people want to see it, a 3-month reserve of
Right.
county operating expenses. And so to the extent we exceed that, it's certainly appropriate for us to use that excess, but that's one-time money. It's once you use it, it's
Mhm.
gone.
Mhm.
And so any kind of one-time funding source does not contribute to a long-term solution.
And we've been using one-time funding sources
Yes.
to fill this gap for ever
Right.
since I've been on the
Right.
county
Yep.
board.
But I
And we're
didn't
just
hear
running out of-
what actually happens if we don't. I mean, what happens to us when we don't make these right decisions is that the state quits paying even more mandated things, right?
If by doing that, we collect more property tax levy than we're allowed to. I don't know that the state penalizes us, but there are certainly auditors and everybody else that's going to come down on us for bad fiscal practices. Our cost of borrowing would increase because we're not following good fiscal practices. So it is not a correct statement on my part. I apologize for that, to say legally we have to balance. Legally, we're only allowed to collect a certain amount of operational property tax levy.
Okay,
That-
no, I
that's
just
the
was
legal
curious
piece.
how
Sorry.
that works. That's okay.
But in general, we need to account for, okay, if we're going to spend this much, we need to know where all that money's coming from. And if we want to be sustainable, we have to know on an ongoing basis where it's going to come from.
All right. That was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
A lot, but great. I mean, I love this document. I think it's going to be really helpful because of the things you hear out, on Facebook and people, there's a lot of misinformation or misunderstood information out there. And so I think it's going to be very important for us to produce some very clearly written documents that explain things.
Sean Murphy Lopez is the chair of the Referendum Ad Hoc Committee, and he put most of this together.
I'm
Does
sure
a
he did.
stellar job.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. Mr. McGuire.
I will just note that we do have a representative of the city of Richland Center. Mayor Todd Coppernall is on the Referendum Ad Hoc Committee, as is a member of the school board for Richland School District. So we do have some of their representation in the mix, and they have been contributing to the discussion. So it's wonderful to have them.
All right. We probably should get going. We have a long way to go on this agenda. Thank you. I appreciate taking the time to explain all that to us. All right, so item number 7, Land and Water Resource Management Plan update. It's back from the DNR.
I have not heard yet back from the DNR.
Okay.
They had the month of August to look at it. We've got a few more days, so I'll probably be contacting them Friday to see where they're at.
Sounds good. All right. So The next item, so last month I provided quite a bit of just some general information that I wanted everyone to take a look at. Nope, that's not the next item. Recreational short-term rental property information is the next one. And- It's because it's in the last months. All of that information was in last month. Yeah. So, I don't know how, so we probably next month, we're going to be having an actual CUP for a short-term rental coming before us. Is that correct? So, I mean, I think if you've looked at all of the information that from last month, you will notice that there are many, many different ways that people or different entities, municipalities have chosen to allow or not allow recreational rentals. I think the one thing that we do want to be is consistent. I think we do want to actually decide what kind of restrictions, if any, or how we want to approach short-term rentals. I don't think we're ready to do that. I think that, so I'm a little bit unsure of how to handle the one that's going to be coming before us next month. I suppose one option would be to delay it until we can have, and really dive and intend to spend a good chunk of time at our next zoning meeting actually working out how we're going to deal with those. Unfortunately, it's going to be our only meeting to talk about the referendum stuff too. So I'm not sure we have the capacity. And so I'm at a quandary of whether we should ask them to delay a month before they come before us, which seems unfair because that's, on the other hand, we should make sure we do it right. I don't want to pass it and then the next month be like, okay, now we're going to inflict, we're going to instill all these rules, and then they're going and so I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling here, but in my opinion, and please tell me what you think. In my opinion, I think that we should have a thorough discussion about this in November and come up with exactly what kind of criteria we are going to have for short-term rentals, and then they could come in December for approval for theirs. That seems like a really long delay. How do you think they'll feel about that? Right?
The attorney's dealing with it right now.
Well, or we can look at theirs. I mean, they have come to us with suggested did everyone read the information from the attorneys that gave us what they're willing to do, what they're, I don't know, but I guess it's elements of the conditional use permit they are offering for us to put in there. I think it addressed almost all of the neighbors' concerns, if not all of the neighbors' concerns in that particular one.
Which one was that?
The lawyers letter.
So we got letters, it would be
Yeah.
in your email,
It's a long.
from the Meisters, is it Meisters? Meisters lawyers,
Here.
that goes detail by detail what they would agree to in a CUP essentially. And it, in my mind, I don't think it addressed every single one of the concerns that the neighbors had raised, but it did a lot of it was addressed. So we could go ahead and just talk about it next time. Is it their lawyers going to be here, or are they going to be here for? You don't know? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Are the property owners not required to come? They can send representatives. What do we require? Nothing?
Someone.
I can't hear you.
So
We just require someone to represent someone to be here. I mean.
so it can be their lawyer. They can designate their
Could be
lawyer as
lawyer,
their,
Could be uncle, aunt, I mean, just as
Whoever they
long as
want.
someone comes here to
Okay.
answer questions is always what's
Okay.
been here.
so, I mean, it does seem, I do think it is a little unfair to try to make someone wait until November for an answer from us. I wish Mr. Wendell was here, I guess. I don't know what our legal obligation is for how quickly we address these. Do you have any idea, Mike?
What's everyone's concern? I guess, talk
Well,
about concerns, I mean.
Well, there's a lot of concern.
Well, Yeah, I mean, I feel like,
There are two other counties. Have you checked out the counties, what they do for conditioners?
oh yeah, and it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
So-
about this?
What I'm envisioning is that we will sit down, and I'd actually like to have some people who have Airbnbs in the room when we have this discussion, because like some of the things that you sent to me as far as like, no indoor or outdoor fireplace.
I don't know.
I mean, I think I would like to know from the people who are actually operating Airbnbs in the county, what seems reasonable, what doesn't seem reasonable. I mean, one big one would be, do we require someone that lives within 30 minutes of the rental to be here? That changes things dramatically. I don't know where Meisters live, but it's probably more than 30 minutes. So that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about we're going to approve this, and then all of a sudden we're going to make up whatever rules we decide they're going to be a month later. And I don't know what that happens to CUPs we've already approved. They're still approved. They're just grandfathered in. Is that how that works?
That's the way I've been told.
Okay. So that's my concern. I want to make sure that I want to do this right. I don't want to, approve this and then change everything the next month or decide something's not okay now a month later.
Madam Chair?
But,
Let Linda go first. Go ahead, Linda.
okay. I'm not saying it, but I thought we were supposed to send you our ideas, and so I did. Not that I think that all of them are what I think we should do,
Right.
but I was just trying to list them. And one of those things, and you're saying differently there, and maybe we need to talk to our lawyer, is that some of the other counties have that once it's passed, that we do a new ordinance for CUP, that the existing ones have 1 year to come up to those standards. So maybe that would answer this question. But I honestly think we should have a separate meeting, and like you said, invite other people, because I think we can't do all this at our normal meeting. And I agree with you, we should be having people who are lots of different ideas in here and have suggestions. I don't know how much money any of us have, because Dave doesn't have, but I did talk to somebody in Adams County. It doesn't mean that they're doing with this one, but they are, this township is not county zoned, it's zoned like Rockbridge and Ithaca of its own. And they have a company, an engineering zoning company, that writes their CUPs and those ordinances for them. And if you don't mind, I was going to call them and ask how much they charge for something like that, because they would have all the legal work, and I think they have done these for other counties. So these are just ideas I have.
So I don't disagree with you about having a separate meeting, because our zoning meetings, with land and zoning meeting together, it does get really long, and we have, I just don't know about the interest or capacity of the committee for another meeting. Mr. Carroll, did you have?
Yeah. In addition to bringing people in that are involved in it already to hear both sides, I think I'd like to see if we can find out just the scale. And there's probably plenty of people that haven't done a CUP who probably should have. And so I think maybe someone did a quick Google search on Airbnb and all that. And so we know it's out there, but maybe something more comprehensive, or I would like to know the scale of it.
Like how many Airbnbs are in
Yeah.
Richland
and-
County?
Or whatever you want to call it. There's other.
Well, VRBO or,
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a whole
Home
list of
away and-
entities.
yeah.
Have
Yeah,
you
a lot of
guys,
times they're cross-listed, but yeah,
Hip Camp, have you heard of that?
I have heard of that.
Okay, who knows how many of those kinds of things are out there?
Yeah. So I do think that it would be good to have a separate meeting where we could have public comments that way. And that way people against them could come as well, and we could, because what I would like is to have one standard that we apply to all Airbnbs, and not, we're going to apply, we're going to approve this CUP with these because this is what those neighbors want. And then we're going to have this one because this is what, that doesn't seem very, I just think we should be more consistent in how we handle it. So that would mean, and by the way, I just printed off. So Columbia County actually has a pamphlet that, I mean, it was just a PDF on their website that actually you can click on and it tells you exactly what you need to do for that petition. So I thought that would be a nice, that's something simple we could put together that we could just put as a PDF on our website that would easily explain to people, here's what you need to do if you want to be an Airbnb in Richland County. So when would, I guess we can talk about the next meeting when we get to future, the adjournment date, whether we want to do something in September. I mean, do we want to try to meet before our next official one, which is when we would be hearing the CUP for the Meisters?
We're inviting a public comment. We want to make sure we have time to roll out,
Right?
Yep.
So, I mean, I was thinking end of September.
yeah.
I would be in favor of us having a special meeting to deal with that because otherwise we're looking at inordinately delaying people who legally own property.
Right?
Following a legal process to do a legal activity on their property.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into that either. I want to be able to move forward with their CUP when it comes to us, so. Okay, all right, when we get to adjournment, we'll talk about dates.
Okay.
All right. So now we get to, and we've already sort of touched on this with the item number 6, but so the resolution directing the Land and Zoning Standing Committee to consider services, develop options, and propose a recommendation on future operations. So that language says we need to come up with $50,000, whether it be in debt or debt reduction, or not debt reduction, sorry, in reducing the budget by 50,000 or increasing our revenues by 50,000. So as I said, Mike, Kathy, and I were thinking they're going to brainstorm some ideas, and I will be involved in that as well. And then I'm hoping we can come with some suggestions. And then if you have any thoughts as far as what you think might be appropriate, MS that also includes Register of Deeds office as well, is also under our purview. It was also stated in the resolution. It wasn't just land and zoning, it was Register of Deeds. So, although I think it's you and a deputy, right? And you just hired a deputy? And your deputy's full-time, correct? Okay. So anyway, if you guys want to brainstorm and think about it, they're going to brainstorm and I'll talk with them and we will come with some options and then we can talk about whether those options, which one we want to recommend to the referendum committee.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
So, Kathy, we're already gonna be saving, is that gonna be part of the 50,000, the rent that you were paying? Is
That's
that,
already included in the budget.
it's already included in the budget?
Yeah.
So it's not part of the new 50,000 then?
No, and the fact too that we're getting, we almost have him hired, the new person, but he'll be doing family plan for health insurance, so. There's an
Your health
increase.
insurance is going up, but you budgeted in 2023 for a
Correct.
family plan, correct?
Correct, plus the
Good
fact that we,
thinking.
so plus the fact that we're getting a little more, about 11,000 more from state revenue.
Right. So there's one area where it actually went up. The staffing grant that comes from the state actually was $11,000 more than she had anticipated for the 2023. Yes,
Madam Chair,
Mr. Turk, yeah.
just the 50,000 is the number by 2027. I'm not sure what the increments are each year.
I don't think there was no increments. It was one of the weird ones. It just said 50,000.
Yeah, that's the end number for the 2027 budget year. So I don't know if we need to ask for a little more guidance on
Clarification.
specific, yeah. Because 50,000 cut out of the 2024 budget is different than 50,000 cut out of the 2027 budget.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we could just cut a few thousand every year, which
I know it's not a cumulative total, because I asked Sean that at the last referendum committee meeting, and he said that was the number for the 2027 budget year was 50. But as far as what the steps looks like up to that.
said 50,000 in 2023 or 20 for the 2024 budget
That's
and
what it said.
maintain that cut every year.
Okay, that's what, okay.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure we got to
So
come up
that's
with
in the
50,000
resolution, not
right
the
now.
chart I was looking at. Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yep,
Gotcha. Thank you.
that's what I read too.
yeah, I'm
Yep.
pretty sure we have to come up with it right away.
Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately, that would be great. The other way would be great.
Yeah. I was hoping.
Okay. So does that seem like and are you comfortable with that path forward, that they'll be brainstorming offline and we will bring it forth to the committee at the next meeting? Okay. Correct. That's what I'm understanding from what you, I mean, I assumed that was
Reductions
true.
to the utilization of property tax levy.
So as long as, I think we'll have to show revenues that we can accurately predict, you know, like if we say, oh, we're just gonna come up with 50,000 more in revenues, we need to be able to show that we can actually do that. But between your department and potentially his department, and maybe even the staffing grants, but I don't know, that's gonna be pretty unpredictable. We could come up with the 50,000 without having to make any cuts to staff.
Service reductions.
We call it service reductions, but it's staff cuts.
I know.
Yeah. Right.
I think we'll be receiving more revenue in the office just from people buying time to use our indexes and so forth. Smaller counties, it has proved to be beneficial and they've made more money doing this, so I'm hoping.
Yeah, the problem is we won't be able to know what, you know, we won't have
Right,
any solid
until you're
numbers.
into it for a year.
Yeah, and we have
It's
to,
hard to, you can only go by what other counties have done.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think
So-
we'll need to keep that kind of in the background
Right.
that we will be able to come with up at least, and then we could make the statement that there's potential for this, you know, this
Right.
software to create more income for
Right.
the departments under this committee's purview. Okay, definitely keep us posted as that moves forward, just as to how it's going and
Okay.
what that's like, you know, how that's how well it's working. Okay, anything else on that topic? All right. Okay, so item number 10. I will preface this by saying that I only did this evaluation from websites. I did not call any county and ask them how their departments were put together and who was in charge and all of that. So it's for informational purposes only, not for that it's all absolutely 100% correct. I think it's fairly correct, but for example, Crawford County, I can find no reference to zoning other than under their land conservation department.
That's when their zoning actually, they don't have a zoning administrator, really, do.
No, when you
It's
click on
sanitation.
zoning, it goes to Dave, the
Yeah, He's-
county con.
it's that and sanitation. They don't
Okay.
have a whole lot of.
So they have
every co-
3 people that handle all of Crawford County's land conservation
And septic,
and
sanitation.
septic. So, yeah, I mean, I
They
couldn't
don't
find
have
anything
rezoning.
else. Do you know, how do they rezone?
Anyways, a lot of the things that you have to understand too, when you're looking at the zoning part of these counties, is that there are some counties, like say Vernon County has no zoning at all. And also a lot of the land conservation does like the non-metallic mining that we do in our office and
So
that, so.
what do you mean
hard to
by
compare.
no zoning at all in Vernon County?
There is no county zoning.
So like Sylvan and Blooming,
Oh, it's all done by township.
well, they have no zoning, there's no township zoning, it's.
Because I
Most-
know when my dad he just built a building in Vernon County and he had to go through a building inspector who was very thorough. And they also inspect sanitation. They have sanitation because
They
they
have
also,
sanitation, but they don't have no county zoning, so
Zoning.
like any rezones like today, there is none of those.
they just let people do whatever they want. Okay, and
It's like
that's
Sylvan and Bloom.
something to know, right?
Yeah.
And that's something to take into consideration as we're talking about.
And I don't think Crawford has county zoning. They just have some townships that are township zone, correct?
Some of
They have
them.
a zoning technician. Proper.
Yeah, I think that's the sanitation.
Oh.
The sanitation. So I think the point of this document is what you can see is that it varies greatly from a tiny little county up north having 20 people in their staff on zoning and land conservation to, you know, Crawford County having 3. The other takeaway is that there are many that do combine zoning and land conservation. What I did see though is that they do seem to have, even though they're under the name of one department, they seem to have they have staff that just does land conservation and they have staff that just does zoning
And
stuff.
the reason for that, I think, has to go back with the staffing grants that,
Right,
the
for the-
land conservation part. Because to get the staffing grants, you have to spend so much, a percentage of your time on,
land conservation
yeah, you can't
practices.
do it on zoning, that's why.
Right. So, I mean, I guess after I felt a little better about the idea of, because at first I was not, I would say I was less than enthusiastic about the idea of having to try to combine these departments. But in looking at all of this information and really just the experience of this committee, where it's interesting to me how much zoning stuff actually plays directly into how we use our land, and land use goes right into land conservation. So I do think that there is an upside to trying to combine departments as well. So I'm just presenting this as information because part of the strategic plan, we were asked to kind of look at the pros and cons of, of combining the departments. So I'm only presenting this as information that you can look at, but I do think we should have probably a more in-depth conversation about literally coming up with a list of pros and cons and making a recommendation. I think the strategic plan asks us to make a recommendation as to whether we think it's a good idea to combine land conservation and zoning departments as into one department, and what that would look like, or what if we do decide that that's a good idea, what it should look like.
And we're already gonna be in the same space, so.
Right. We need to figure out the logistics of. So I don't know if you all know, but once the emergency management moves out of the basement, which is going to be, and you guys are supposed to move in by October-ish?
That's the plan. We're still trying to figure out where everybody's gonna go and where things are gonna go.
And I'm assuming there's going to be some MIS involvement maybe, or do they have?
We have a meeting every Tuesday morning.
Okay,
The three of us, Clinton, Cheryl, and IS staff. So
okay,
we're working on it.
all right. Mr. Carroll.
Minor question, but yellow cell.
Oh,
towers
so the
versus-
yellow is just highlighted the ones that are closest in population and kind of makeup of Richland County.
Okay,
I was going to just do those, and then I got distracted and did a whole bunch more. And so I just added the other ones as additional information. Some of them are very, very large and are, not very comparable to Richland County. Very interesting. I mean, I think it's like every single time I do one of these comparisons, what I find out is that every county does it different. Nobody does it the same. And so we, I guess, really just need to determine what works best for us and although I did find it interesting that like Crawford County, or there's places where they don't zone. And I mean, I guess that could be something we consider. If we're going to reduce services, do we want to not worry about zoning? I don't know. So, I mean, I think that Crawford could probably give us a few examples of when it is not so great.
Well, didn't they just have a huge?
They did. Yeah. So, all right. Anything, I don't think we want to delve into, because we've already spent a lot of time talking about other things. I don't want to dive into it too deeply, but I did want to at least show you that I've started gathering the information. I think it's very interesting to look at what titles. I think it also pointed out to me how GIS, we are probably understaffed in GIS, although it was interesting to me that a lot of times the real property lister and the GIS person were the same person. That happened quite often in quite a few counties. So I thought that was interesting. And there was quite a bit of overlap. There was times when people had multiple titles. That was also very common. Like soil conservationist / sanitation. Or, I mean, there was, and you should take some time and just look through the titles, the job titles for each of those positions. Because you'll see that there's quite a few areas where things are just kind of like their assistant code administrator, land conservation. So there's definitely a lot of sharing going on among the positions. So that's also something to consider. All right. 2023 budgets, you guys, there's really nothing to talk about.
Not to talk about, I just wanted, in case somebody wanted to say something.
Well, just other than to say you went before finance, well, before Clint and finance. And did anyone have any comments on either of your budgets that was anything of concern?
No, I don't think, none of mine.
I don't remember anything coming up for either of you. Your budgets are pretty straightforward and they're very small, so. Oh, that's true, yeah. Okay, so with that, I will bring so I asked Director Gudgeon to come today because he came before the Public Safety Committee because emergency management is now under the purview of public safety. And we are in the process of updating our hazard mitigation plan. And in reading that, it occurred to me that there are many items on there that are very relevant to this body, both these departments and this group. And so I wanted him to come and talk about what's in the plan. And then I think the goal is to get any kind of feedback from our committee and from the department heads as to what else we might want to put in this. But I also do intend to, I think we should start talking about some of these things at this committee as to, are there zoning decisions we're making that directly conflict with things that make sense for hazard mitigation? And just making sure that we're being smart about how we manage the land in Richland County. So with that, you would need a mic.
There's one right here.
Seems really.
It's usually cold.
It is.
Okay, so what I'd like to start out is going over Appendix C and Appendix D. Now, the entire draft plan is on the county website. We released, did a press release last week for the public, seeking public input on this first draft plan. We used Facebook. We sent out Nixle messages, which is a tool that we use to send out emails to alert citizens in the area when they sign up for that service of things going on. We did bring it to public safety. And so talking to Melissa, this seemed like a proper committee to bring it to too, especially with the fact that as we go through this update, I send out surveys to all the department heads, particularly Kathy's office, Mike's office, and Highway, because a lot of the things that they do, you know, are around land use, zoning, roads, and that's what gets impacted when we have disasters, particularly flooding, which is our #1 disaster in the county. So a little background on this. Every county, including the state of Wisconsin, has to have a FEMA-approved hazard mitigation plan in order for the county or any municipality within the county to receive any funds during a presidentially declared disaster. And we're in our update of our plan. So the plan goes 5 years, a 5-year cycle. Original plan was written about 15 years ago. And our process through this, besides gathering information on events that we've had and sending surveys out to municipalities, you know, such as streets and utilities and county departments, we also send out surveys to every township, their clerk, and then their board can go through them. We send out to all the villages, so their village board can go through. And that survey really has them let us know, what are your strategies to be more resilient in a disaster, and what steps would you like to see if funding was available to mitigate against the loss of property, life, you know, just land degradation, people moving out, that kind of thing because of each disaster. So this is pretty intensive and comprehensive, and we now have received all of our surveys back from all 16 townships, the 5 villages, and the city of Richland Center, along with a handful of others. So Appendix C is the summary of mitigation strategies, and this gets filled in based on that information that comes from the municipalities, the clerks, department heads, the public. There are some ideas in here that the public has had that we thought, hey, that's a really good idea. And so everything that you see in Appendix C is a strategy that could potentially reduce the loss of life and or reduce the amount of impact that a disaster has. And recent studies have shown for every dollar you put towards mitigation, you receive $11 back. And we've had some really good success in some mitigation projects over the course of my tenure. Not just buying out homes, but elevating homes. Relocating WRCO is a big one. Working with townships and the county highway whenever possible to re-engineer roads, upgrade culverts. All of that has an impact on future disasters. So Appendix C, Summary of Mitigation Strategies, again, is kind of the part of this document that these are things that were identified either by myself or another entity that if we were to do them, we could save or reduce the damage that occurs. So the first section is just all hazards, and you can see in the responsible management is it's the department or the entity that would be kind of the lead on seeing this through. So what I did for you folks is going through Appendix C, anything that has land and zoning in it, we've highlighted that. So kind of go through, find the first one, and the very first one that you'll see is zoning strategies. So this was something that I kind of put in on my own with some feedback. And it doesn't commit anybody to anything, but one of the things that I had talking to Melissa, we both kind of shared was this plan gets updated, and then aside from what we do out in some of the municipalities, it doesn't really move. It's not being used to its full potential. And so I thought that, well, one of the things would be is to continue to enforce sensible zoning restrictions. Not to say that we're not, but I think that communication back and forth on if a landowner comes to Mike and they want to do something, but I have information that they've been impacted by flooding for X amount of times, maybe there's a different way to do their project that might help them be less susceptible to damage from a flood or something like that. So just sharing of information. So the other thing that I thought would be good is putting together just a task force or a focus group to promote the mitigation, preparedness, and resiliency efforts and projects in Richland County. In the emergency management side, we have what's called a local emergency planning committee, and that's made up of people from industry, schools, hospital, public safety, and we review the plans for facilities, but we also talk about, we've got a new daycare center that's going in across from Foremost Farms. They aren't privy to the training and the exercises and the information that we've had regarding Foremost Farms having nearly, 18,000 pounds of anhydrous ammonia. So we're going to reach out to them and, hey, we'd like to do a tabletop exercise with you. Get the two parties together. This is what sheltering in place means. And that committee works really well. They meet a couple times a year. They share ideas on how to help the public be more aware of the hazards that are in our county. I'd like to see something like this happen as well. We could be in anything from land use to educational materials to, looking for grant funding for projects that would reduce our impact or reduce the dollar it costs us when we have an event. And we have events pretty regularly. 2007 and 2008 were floods of record for our area. 2010, we were flooded again, didn't receive any federal funding. 2013, flooded again, did receive federal funding. 2016, 17, again, were significant floods. We received presidential declarations. And then 2018 was the flood of record for the village of Viola and other parts of our area. And you can see how wet it's been, because if you talk to anybody like the gentleman sitting to the left of me who lives in town of Buena Vista, he's probably heard from hundreds of his neighbors about, I'm still pumping water out of my basement. Some of that is getting better, but if those ideas and suggestions and or problems never get farther than just that conversation, then, you know, we don't see any progress. So it's kind of like the same thing, many hands make light work. I think in this, you know, more minds at the table, more eyes on it, more lenses from different angles might help us to actually see some of these mitigation strategies come to fruition, which will in turn get us a return on our investment. So I don't want to belabor this too much. I know it's been a long day, but the areas where you see highlighted, it's either zoning and emergency management working together, zoning and land conservation working together. You can see the priority. Again, some of it says funding allows. And then because this is a draft plan, in each section, so it's all hazards, it's drought, it's blizzard, it's flooding, it's severe thunderstorms, it's lightning, it's fog. Each section has an area that's green, and that's a new strategy. So if any of you on the committee or department heads even, you know, if you didn't think of something when you with the survey, and you're like, you know what, I know in my area that I represent that they're constantly dealing with this based off runoff, drought situations, flooding, whatever, please email me and we can talk about it. We can kind of look at what the verbiage needs to be, and we can get it in this plan before it goes to county board in September. So that's pretty much section C. C are things that have been identified that we would like to do, and subsequently on the side all the way to the right, there are different notes on some of these projects that we've done. Appendix D is a report on what we have done. So it might be a strategy that's been closed out. It might be a strategy that we're still working on, but we haven't completed it. For instance, we've been approached by Sextonville, Gotham, Rockbridge, and Hub City. We'd like to have sirens in our community for tornadoes. It's as funding becomes available. Sirens are a real low funding priority when it comes to the federal government. Tornado shelters, on the other hand, are a high priority. And so the village of Lone Rock had identified, man, we've got 2 trailer parks. It'd be really nice to have a couple of tornado shelters in those locations so that if people need to get out of their mobile home, they can, and they have a safe place to go. So that is something we're going to try to look at and work with them on in 2023. But D is strategies that were identified and where we're at. Some of them are completely closed out, so you'll get to see some of the projects that we've actually done, and some that are still outstanding because we're working towards wrapping them up. So D is progress on a strategy through its completion. C is a new strategy that's been identified with surveys, email input, and just different meetings that we've had with the city of Richland Center, with the village of Viola, just being 2, where they actually invited myself and the planner to sit down with us because they wanted to have that meeting one-on-one and share their ideas. Kind of wordy questions. Did I cover kind of what you're looking for?
Yep. Do you have a question, Mr. Carroll, or what's that look for?
Well, it's kind of a question comment. One of the things that I've noticed since I've continued to try to get more educated now that I'm on the board is that when it comes to all the ordinances and things, building codes is something you don't really find easily. And I'm just wondering if building codes is something we want to think about as a way to reduce the impact. And I don't even know what they do right now, but I don't know what other place it would be, responsibility to look into. The building permit system is through our, land use and zoning, and so it references building codes, but they're not there on our website. So I'm just wondering what you thought about that.
Well, I know in my office, John Heinen, who's the gentleman who's been working with me on updating this plan, all of the literature that we've read in other communities, both in Wisconsin and external, your zoning department and how you manage or what you have for building codes has a significant impact on future events, and when we have floods, Mike and before him, Harriet, we communicate pretty regularly. Mike is actually on the damage assessment team. So if I have a property that gets impacted and it's in a floodway, it's automatically kind of talking to him and saying, hey, where is this at? How much, what's the damage? Because if it's over 50% of the value of the property, then there's some issues like rebuild and repair, correct, Mike? So he's already in on that, but I think we could do more to strengthen that I guess, to be honest with you, Mr. Carroll, I'm not even sure where our building codes are at, how I would find them.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So,
That-
I mean, I'm sure Mike
When
would
you
know, but I
mentioned
don't.
building codes, are you looking at the UDC building codes or are you
Well,
talking?
that's the one that- Well,
Probably both.
UBC is the one that currently governs, right?
Okay, so then UDC, we contract out with or a person from Platteville.
I understand. I'm just saying that it'd be nice if we understood the building, maybe at least awareness of what it covers and whether we think it's good enough. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for me, and I've wanted this since the first day I got on the board, is I really would like us to have more of a proactive than reactive approach to many things that we do. And how what can we be doing to make ourselves better prepared, because we know the floods are going to happen again. They are pretty regular anymore. I hate to say that. So, what I'm looking for is how can we be more proactive, and are there things that, because this as a committee now, because we're talking about land use and certainly soil and water conservation is right in the purview of land conservation as well. I just feel like this is a great body to have really in-depth conversations about making sure we make good decisions about what we approve, or what kind of ordinances we want to create that would guide people to make sure that they make appropriate decisions on how they use. I know it gets touchy when you're trying to tell people how to use their own land, but we should, or maybe education. I mean, the education piece, when people are coming before us, maybe we just want to, have some educational material that we just make sure that they, are aware.
So does the county adopt uniform building codes, or is that a municipal thing because of home rule?
Well, municipal UDC codes is all under state statutes and all that. I mean, they're their own guidelines, nothing different than anywhere else from county to county. But like, we have the contracted person that takes care of it. So
Takes care of it as in if somebody is not following them?
he issues the permits for the UDC. We look at the location of the building, the residence.
Right.
He looks at how it's built. So he looks at the electrical, he looks at the plumbing, he looks at the air conditioning. So, I mean,
So those are state codes.
state codes, I mean,
Yeah.
well, national codes are kind of different throughout the states, because I mean, we have, for instance, like stronger structured rafters than down south because of the snow loads. So
But it's
there's a
all
little bit
under
of difference.
UBC, right?
So each state adopts their own UBC
Right.
from the
Pretty much
federal
follow the
standards?
same, but there's different ones.
I don't know.
So it could be emphasis like we don't see hurricanes, but we can see derechos.
Right, something like that.
Okay,
There's
so
different-
wind load versus snow load. I mean, I talked to, anytime there's a disaster, we could have anywhere from 60 homes all the way up to 575 homeowners impacted. And I get this question all the time, and I really, other than to go to you, I wouldn't know. Maybe it is something that we can bring those codes, put them on a website so that I can point landowners when they are impacted to go here.
Well, like the floodplain rule that you mentioned before, the 50% damage, that's not a UDC code, that's underneath the floodplain codes.
Right.
So I mean, depending on what you're looking at, depends on where you have to go to find it.
Maybe there's a way to create a roadmap. I'm just thinking for, homeowners that are impacted.
I mean, everybody expects to be able to find stuff online. Like, God forbid they want to call you up and ask you. They just want to be able to click a button. I'm guilty of that.
I'm assuming that's probably a stupid question, Mike, but I don't know. Is it in a PDF version that we could pull down?
As memory goes. I'm assuming the building codes is a giant document. Or is it just a link? You could
I
just
think
put a
most
link
of
in.
the ordinances are out there already.
We just put a link.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Carroll.
I was just wondering if this emergency, group, I don't remember what you call it.
LEPC?
Yeah. Is there a representative from the insurance industry there? I mean, they're all about risk management and,
Yeah. I don't know. Our group per se has to have members of certain groups by federal law. So I know we've got media there, schools, industry, health, fire, EMS, and then elected officials, both state, local, and then DNR. I know that like Foremost and Schreiber's, their risk managers are a part of, that's who they have come to this meeting. But for insurance specific, I don't recall. But I could see this group, if this ever were to come true, having some public, folks on it. One of the biggest questions I get asked all the time is about flood insurance. Do I need it? Should I get it? How much does it cost? Where do I get it? Who can sell it to me? Who can't? So, yeah, that's the source to have to the table.
Okay, so if you guys would just take a few minutes at some point to read through this, and if you have any ideas, please send them to Director Gudgeon, and then we can,
So Appendix C is only 20 pages. D is 18. The entire plan is 312, I think. So this is really the meat and potatoes. Not saying you can't go look at that plan. I just thought this is the part that you'd probably find the most interesting. And if you have a strategy like the building code thing, I would love to hear it and put it in our plan.
and what is your deadline?
We're going to present it to public safety, if we've had any input. I have heard from a couple other entities, they just haven't gotten back, but really by Friday the 9th, so that I can have
Friday the 9th
of September, because it's got to go to county board in September.
Public Safety is this Friday, isn't it?
But we can still add. I mean, if there's something that comes that late, assuming I can add it if
I
it's
think so.
a worthy
I think so.
strategy. I don't want to
So.
turn anybody away.
Madam Chair?
Okay, yeah,
I'll ask quick because I know time.
that's okay.
I just read it, I was reading it before. It says the county is installing a new server between zoning and the sheriff's office. And I didn't understand what that was, a new server between those two.
Is it in C?
D.
It's in D. So that was done a while ago. And we're finding out now that that server is full.
Is that the 911?
Yes.
Entering the 911? Address
Oh,
stuff into the
that's-
911?
Oh.
There's a whole
okay,
bunch of
that's what
different ones,
must
but the
have-
one that went down was the Buffalo, but that had the videotape of the sheriff's department and our orthos. But there's a new one, but our old drive is pretty much full already.
Because obviously, the
They
GIS position
All right,
works
okay,
very
so
closely with
okay.
the sheriff's department and entering,
you.
addressing stuff into addresses into 911. Okay, thank you. I think we'll have you back at,
Thanks.
we have a lot on our plate right now, but I do want to keep this on the radar. All right, so that brings us to item number 13, conservation technician position update.
Well, C and I did a first interview two weeks ago,
Yeah.
and we did
I got a
Kent
parking
Marshall.
ticket, by the way.
Huh?
I got a parking ticket that day. Anyway.
And then we had this. We had the second interview last week, Kent Marshall and I did, and we did kind of a little more in depth, and we did kind of a skill test to see where they're at. None of the people had job experience, but they had education, and we we offered the job to Mr. Derek Warner. He's located just in Crawford County, and he accepted, and he's going to start the 12th. So
Good candidates. I would say there wasn't a bad one that we interviewed. I was pleasantly surprised. Did we interview 5?
we interviewed 5, and
Five.
then the second one we did 4.
All 4 of them? Yeah. Yeah, no, there wasn't. I mean, of course, it would have been great to have someone walk in the door with a ton of experience, but that
And that person that had more experience had just taken another job in another county, so, oops.
Yeah, I mean, before they even interviewed,
Mhm.
they took another job, so. So that's good news. I was pleasantly surprised to have a good, to be able to make a choice that you didn't feel was not great, so. And then GIS sanitation position, Lynn's last day is?
Last day is September 6th. Last 4 weeks we've been advertising for it, and we only gotten 4 applications. Farthest one away so far has been Kuwait.
Funny fact, we interviewed someone who was in India,
From Botswana.
but she was from Botswana. Did any of them have experience?
Not in GIS that we're looking for.
So I had a thought, and I think I mentioned this the other day, is there a GIS class at Southwest Tech where we could just plop a flyer on the thing saying, hey, if you're actually interested in doing GIS work?
I haven't checked, but
I mean, I can't, and you're on Indeed? Are you shaking your head? There's nothing at Southwest Tech that does GIS. Where do people learn how to do GIS around here? Online? Oh, you doing Platteville? So again, same question. Is there
Wait,
something
University?
yep.
interesting? Indeed, and where else were you advertising it?
I have it on
Our website?
the website, but then also other county websites. The land information officers website out there for everyone. So
Oh, okay.
there's different ones that we put it on there. I mean, I think on 4 different sites.
So you haven't even interviewed any of the ones that applied?
Like I said, one's from Ohio, one's from Kuwait, one's a meteorologist out of Madison, and one that does GIS, or not GIS, but it's more of application studies and all that. How to hack into other applications, I should say.
What a hack?
Very much, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Put that on your resume. Hacker.
Madam Chair, I think you should have where they can get these certifications ready for, at the interviews and everything so that they know. I think that should be your job.
What?
They should know where you can get the GIS and the sanitation certifications. I think that Mike should have that if he does interviews, he should have that where they can
So
do
far,
that.
you haven't even scheduled any interviews?
No, but I think you should research that.
So, okay. So what is your plan after she leaves on the 6th?
Well, I think the county plan is you gotta wait 60 days of no qualified applications and you can review to see if you can get higher pay.
But is that even going to help?
Can't promise them anything to make them come. I mean, yeah,
So have you had inquiries that in some way has indicated to you that you aren't getting applicants because of the pay, or?
the people I've been talking to find out that you have to have the soils and the policy inspection and all that, and
They don't want that part of it.
they don't want that part and it's not enough pay.
Suggestions? So are we contracting? Are we going to contract? Because obviously the work's not going to stop.
We're looking into that. We're getting bids right now for that.
So are you working with Administrator Langrick on all of this?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only other option I can see that it's gonna happen now is that we'll have no one to do GIS.
Right. So I know that, or I believe I was at a Southwest Regional Planning Commission meeting last week. I believe the Director Maggie said that they are doing Lafayette County's GIS on contract basis, or Greene County. So that is another potential option for contracting if something doesn't work out with. And I don't know, or potentially cheaper option. I have no idea. I didn't ask any details, but they are doing GIS contract work for at least one of the counties within the 5-county membership. I mean, it can't stop because this GIS person, just for anyone who doesn't know, they enter anytime there's address changes or changes to, well, mostly, yes, that's really important. But what I'm more concerned about is making sure that like 911 can find people if something, if we have an address. And I don't know how often those kind of changes.
We were talking about that, the NG 911.
Right.
That stuff, so. Contractor's a good company, or whatever, that weekly, rather than monthly or year. The big thing.
Yeah, we can't have a year go by with that inaccurate addressing for 911 responses. That would be disastrous. So,
Chair,
yes,
you mentioned earlier that one county had the property lister and GIS together. And do we have a new property lister now?
Just started, yeah.
Okay, and have you had any discussion with her about getting the GIS certification and whether with Clint or anyone about how that might impact salary or whatever?
Talked to her yet. She just started day, and most of her day was probably spent with handling.
that's not a bad idea. We could at least ask. I mean, I don't, just for lack of, I mean, we certainly need to look into the contracts as well, but I don't know, that may be a very expensive. My understanding was it was not inexpensive to contract those services.
Correct.
So potentially we could at least ask. Can't hurt to ask the person if they have any interest in learning GIS. I mean, Lynn learned it, right?
Correct.
Although we have an expectation of we want them to already know,
It would be best,
right?
in some experience. But I don't know how much experience a person has with property lister right now.
Yeah, I have no idea. I had trouble keeping that position filled.
Sue knows, but Jessica.
I mean, it's at least, it can't hurt to ask I don't think it hurts to ask. Right now, yeah, just started. Okay. Well, I guess as long as you're working with administrative language to come up with a solution so that we will be, for at least emergency stuff would be getting entered while we figure out that position. And I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on anywhere else we could potentially advertise to try to, what about, I don't do this either, but I was thinking about what if we started doing like actual apprenticeships with some of our high school seniors, as far as getting them into county government. Obviously that's not, I don't know. They're pretty savvy. I mean, a senior in high school maybe would already, have some, especially if they're really interested in maps. But I was just kind of trying to think ballpark, just kind of think of ideas of where we could get, because I'm not sure, most seniors in high school probably don't think that they would be able to get a job in the county. The only good thing, one of many good things about younger is that you can bring them in and train them, the way you want them to, do the
But we
job.
would have someone already here that would train them.
Well, then we'd have to maybe,
But then we're looking at more money, so it's not going against the budget rules of save money.
all right, well, I guess we'll see what happens after she leaves. Is administrative language giving you any thoughts on, is his suggestion right now is contracting the service?
It's the only thing we really have. Can't hire anyone that we don't have an application for.
So he determined that the 4 people that applied, you don't have to interview because they are not.
I can talk to them about it, but I don't see any those qualifications.
Because, I mean, we interviewed 5 people and none of them had practical experience. Well, yeah, I mean, very minimal, very, very minimal. And we interviewed them anyway. And actually ended up, I mean, I feel like he's got a lot to learn. They all would have had a lot to learn, but how do we get new people into the field if we aren't willing to take people without experience?
I'll talk to Clinton about it and we'll go from there.
I mean, I realize it's not ideal. Obviously, it would be way better. I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way. It would have been way better to have someone who knows what they're doing and could walk in the door and, engineer a practice. But that's not where we're at. It's not the reality.
Well, okay, I think as department chair, you should be, figuring out where you can get the training. And also, I like this idea of the apprenticeship. Maybe you could contact the tech person at the high school and I think be more assertive in seeing what we can do to help your department.
Got to think outside the box. We just do. And again, I realize it's not ideal and it's not. what we
Well,
want.
something you have to remember is that the public out there is hearing about the budget cuts and we're cutting
know.
positions, so
I know.
no one wants to come to
I
a
know.
county that's. It's hard to get anyone to come in that knows that maybe next year you're not gonna have a job or you're cut.
Well, the good news is land and zoning. I don't think, I think, well, who knows, but I don't know. I mean, we were able to get four kids. I mean, they're all kids, young for the most part, very young. I guess I'm just really encouraged by what we were able to do with land conservation. So I don't know, but that's with Kathy being willing to bring someone in with no experience or not the experience that she wanted. I mean, it's the reality we're living in. Put on the wage scale.
Take that
That's
sanitation
unfortunate.
away from it.
So is that what you were suggesting? Is that potentially we, in order
Is I had.
to try to
Just
just make it a GAS position, but then we still have the issue of sanitation. And you're the other sanitation officer at this point?
in contact with them. You know, and like,
Have you specifically asked them if they're,
asking around.
we're not the only county in the area with vacant GIS positions, correct?
Right. Mention off, yeah.
Yep, yep. I mean, they're filling it with contract work. Grant County went through 3 in the last 6 years.
I know the person.
County just lot.
Okay, well, I mean, keep working with Administrator Langrick and just, I don't know what we can do, but if there's anything we as a committee can do, let us know what role you see us playing as far as helping with recruitment. I mean, we can spread the word. Okay, anything else on that? Now that we're all thoroughly depressed. Public comment we already had. I don't see it still in the room, so item 16, future agenda items. I feel like we have a lot on our plate. right now, but is there any future agenda items? Okay. We'll deal with what's already on our agendas. All right, so that brings us to adjournment. So can we, does everyone have calendars? So we're talking about September. How is the last week in September? So that would be the 26th through the 30th. How is that looking for people? It would be afternoon. We want people to, well, we're looking at the week of the 26th through the 30th. I just wanted, we haven't picked a date yet. Is there a day that doesn't work for people that week? I think, Dave, you're probably the one with the worst schedule.
Monday would be tight for me also.
Okay, so no Monday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday? I'm assuming we don't want to meet on a Friday afternoon, please. Or, but we can if we need to.
And we have a medical appointment at 11:45 on Wednesday, but I'm available any other time during that day.
Okay. So how about Thursday, the 29th at 3? Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Yep. And this will specifically be, so essentially, I guess it's a special meeting, and it's specifically to talk about recreational rentals. So I don't know that, Kathy, you need to be here for that. Someone else will have to take minutes. Is that? I can do it if you want. Okay.
So do we need to pay for an ad in the paper or, for motel, hotel? I mean, anybody who wants to make a short term, I mean,
I feel like if I just call up Marty Richards, that
Okay,
he would let everybody know who's.
that's a good idea.
Because there's only 10 permitted Airbnbs in our county, correct? So I think, I'm pretty sure Marty knows who all of them are.
The 12th, September 12th. No,
Oh.
he's asking for another thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a different meeting, not to do with us. Okay, so I feel like I will let him know that we will be discussing what kind of restrictions and or rules or regulations we will be putting or may be putting on.
I've had some people complaining about things, so I'm gonna let them know too. I mean, is that all right?
I mean,
Because
as
I
much
don't know
as-
why they're complaining, but,
I feel like we should just have all the parties in the room and let's just
Yeah.
talk about it. I mean, I think we'll limit each person to 2 minutes or something to make sure that we don't end up with a really out of control meeting. Does it work for you?
what?
Okay.
And our next regular meeting,
Would be
we'll have to put in the public hearing for the, and the water plan. It'll be on
Okay.
our agenda.
Okay, so October 3rd will be our next normal meeting. Thursday, and then we'll meet again at that meeting, that CUP for the Meisters will be coming forward, I'm assuming.
And so at the other meeting, we should be giving you even more ideas if we can, and maybe we should all look up can you forward that Columbia one, or should we just,
I can
Yeah.
see. I'll create a folder that has everything,
yeah.
all the information in one place, so it's easy to
Yeah.
find. Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by McGuire, second by
I'll second.
Carol. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All
Okay,
right.
great.
We are adjourned.